Welcome to Hot Hero Sandwich with Stockard Channing, Dr. J, Julius Erving, McLean Stevenson, and Sally Struthers. In conversation with Tom Cottle.
McLean, when you were young, people had expectations of you or had thoughts about you. But who were you to you?
Well, I was like two different people. I'm not saying split personalities. I'm not talking about something, maybe I was. Maybe I was a Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. Maybe there were two me's.
Who were they?
Well, I think the one me was what I thought my parents wanted me to be, and I think the other me was what I wanted to be. And they were constantly in conflict. And whereas I've said now many times I was not intelligent, I was smart enough to be able to manipulate. I was a great manipulator. And the part of me, I guess, that wanted to be what I wanted to be could manipulate the other one so that it appeared to my parents that I was what they wanted me to be, but in my own mind, I was really being what I wanted to be.
I was very gregarious and overt and nervy, and other kids who aren't that way really seem to admire that. A little later on in life, you get called a show-off or gee, you know, by the time you're in your 20s and you're still acting ridiculous, people say, boy, does that girl really have a problem? She can never calm down. But when you're in grade school and in high school, kids think it's really neat if you're wild and crazy.
My mother had a great ability to pull herself together. And as I was a kid, I used to watch her get dressed, and I used to, my little task was to fill her cigarette case and to put her little evening bag filled with the handkerchief and the cigarette, whatever. And I would do this while she'd be getting dressed, and she could be thrashing around, furious at something had gone wrong. Maybe she was angry at my father, angry at my sister, or whatever it was. And her face would be all splotchy, and she'd have hair curlers in her hair. She'd be stomping around, looking awful, I thought. And she'd get into her clothes and sort of zip herself up and take the curlers out, put powder on her nose and lipstick on her face, and literally take a deep breath, and she'd become this other person. And it always fascinated me as a kid, because I said, that's what grown-ups, they can do that. How do they do that?
We now return to Hot Hero Sandwich.
Let's talk about going to school. What do you think about when you think about being young and going to school?
Guess I was thinking about getting out. See, if I'd have spent as much time doing my homework as I did figuring out ways of getting out of it, I'd have probably been a Phi Beta Kappa.
See, I went to elementary school in Hempstead, a school called Prospect School. And one of the jokes about school was we used to call it Prospect University. And everybody said, oh, you go to PU, huh? You know?
If I don't mean to sound sort of melodramatic about it, but I did have that sensation that I think kids who do make good grades have, that if they ever slip back, the world would collapse. You know, because it would be so humiliating. I mean, and I never did. It was constant up, 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 and don't look back down. I mean, if I got a C, it was like, it would be mortifying to me, and everything would crack. I wish I should have gotten a couple of C's to see that the world didn't end, perhaps, you know. And then actually when I got to college, I got into what is known as sophomore slump. Sophomore slump, when I couldn't do anything right, and I started getting a couple of C's, and worse than that. And maybe that was some sort of psychological reaction to all that overachieving that had gone on when I was in high school.
I hate it when people say puppy love. You know why? Because puppies can get hurt. They can. And they have the same feelings as adults. I'm convinced. I have never been as devastated in my life as when Mary Ellen Ryan left Bloomington, Illinois. I never got over that, I don't guess. I don't know. It was the most painful thing in my life. And my father was aware of it, my mother was aware of it, and they all say, you'll get over it, time will take care of it, vaza, vaza, vaza. And of course time takes care of it. And of course you get over it. But it's very painful when it's happening. You see, everybody, I think then and now, wants to be loved, wants to give love.
I never really asked a girl out till it was junior prom. And then or the junior ball, and then it was senior prom. You know, it was pretty difficult for me to do at that time, because I guess I didn't want the rejection. You know, I was like, "Oh, what would I do?" She said, "No, I don't want to go with you, or go on with somebody else." But I eventually did, you know, ask the girl out. And we went and had a pretty nice time. You know, it was a short night. Gave her a little peck on the cheek after I took her home.
I went with a boy named Doug Dyer, a Canadian boy who was one of like 7 boys. So every time I went over to Doug's house, I was around all these boys, and I thought that was really neat. And he had a car. His brothers and Doug were all in the business of buying cars that had been in terrible auto wrecks, bringing them home to their garage and completely pounding them out and doing the body work and painting them and selling them again and making very large profit. So Doug was always driving some interesting car, a Corvette, an Austin Healey, something. And of course, when you're in high school and your boyfriend has a car, especially in Portland, Oregon in the 60s, so I was really hot stuff on campus because my boyfriend had a car.
When you were young, did you think of yourself as a rich kid?
No, because everybody else was rich, too.
Were you aware of kids that were not living as you were living?
Not too much. I had cousins who I would visit that weren't living as well as I was living. But I really sort of envied them a lot of stuff because they went to coeducational high schools, they had dances, they had dates, you know, and it seemed a lot more exciting to me than the kind of controlled environment that I was raised in. I had a first cousin whose family I spent a lot of time in, who lived in the island, and they weren't poor. They were probably average, middle class, I suppose, people, and had, you know, the more average kind of life. You know, they sit and watch television on Saturday night, and then they go down the corner and get the ice cream. Everybody eats the ice cream, and I thought that was fabulous, you know. Sometimes, you know, the rich cousin from New York, I'd feel a little bit like that, but nothing horrible. And they were right. I was a little different. So what are you going to do about it?
There was a girl that lived down the block named Dorinda, whose family had money, and she was nice enough that she would send every year a box of clothes up to the house, and I would wear Dorinda's hand-me-downs. And wintertime, either my Aunt Yaya or my grandparents would buy my sister and me our winter coats. And part of me resented that. I wanted to wear my own clothes all the time that weren't somebody's hand-me-downs. And I'm not saying I didn't have my own clothes, but there were enough hand-me-downs that it really bothered me.
I've always had, you know, some type of, you know, part-time job, either after school and during the summer. I never let a summer go by without getting some type of job, you know, and it ranged from working a paper route to stock boy in a jewelry store. Had a job at a bakery. Had a job at a bicycle parts company. You know, I've had all kinds of little jobs. You know, most of them using, you know, my hands, and most of them were labor type of jobs. And that's why I always felt, you know, once I didn't have to anymore, you know, I wouldn't have a job that required physical labor. And here I am, a professional athlete, which is the epitome of physical labor, you know. But they pay for it.
We now return to Hot Hero Sandwich.
Let me go back a little bit and ask about your brother Marvin now.
My brother died in 1969, lupus erythematosus.
Lupus erythematosis?
Yeah. Yeah.
How?
He was 16 at the time, and I was 19. I was a freshman in college. As a matter of fact, my mother brought him up, mother and father, brought him up to see me play at the University of Massachusetts. I was a freshman at the time, and they came up on my birthday, February 22nd. And at that time, you know, he complained of, you know, some aches and pains, and she had taken him to see a couple of doctors at the time, and they thought it might have been a type of bursitis or arthritis. But I went back home after that, and I stayed in school. And then I got a call April 3rd, and told me that, you know, I should come home because my brother was really taking a turn for the worse. And, you know, they said they didn't think he was going to make it. And, you know, I was just completely shocked because, I mean, I had no conception that, you know, pains in your wrist or arthritis or whatever they were talking about before would be enough to kill him. And by the time I got home, he had died. I really didn't know what to make of it. And I guess there are two ways that you can go when something like that happens. Either, you know, you go into the tank and now you become functionless and, you know, you walk around in fear of everything and have no faith. And you have doubts about every step that you take. You know, or you can pull yourself together and gain strength and gain understanding out of it.
I didn't know how to behave, really, at that time. I remember the funeral. I remember I was the only one who didn't cry, even though I was probably as close to my father as anybody. I remember a thing like after the funeral, we went back and there were 3 kinds of pie on the table and all these people in the house and stuff like that. And it didn't make any sense to me emotionally, because I think I thought of death and grief and everything I read about it was a very empty place and not with all these people around it. Then I had to go back to school, and I felt a little strange because, oh, you know, there's Susan, her father died, and stuff like that. And I was really in a state of suspended animation. But I was back at school in the fall, and I was in the infirmary, and it was October, I remember, and I woke up in the middle of the night, and I realized I would never see my father's face again, and I realized I was forgetting what he looked like. And it was devastating to me, and I just started sobbing, not hysterically, but sobbing, and I finally was able to let the pain of the loss out.
Wish my dad was still around to tell him that I really love him and that I forgive him and that I understand that even though you're a parent, that there's temptations in life and there are failures. What happened when I was 19, he bought me, and I put bought in quotes, a car, a 1959 Plymouth or something with those big Flash Gordon tail wings and everything, to have in Hollywood, because I'd finished at the Pasadena Playhouse. And then what happened was he wrote me a letter and he sent me a check, and he said that the check was like for $67 and that he hadn't paid for the car and that the man that owned the car was really angry, and here was a check to help make a payment on it or whatever. And then I got a letter from a collection agency saying that they would be coming to California to take the car away. Well, that made me very angry with my father. He'd failed me once again. So when I got another letter from my father saying that he missed me and that he was lonely and that he didn't feel well and that his wife was giving him such a hard time, my father remarried, that she wouldn't let him make long-distance phone calls. Would I please call him or something? I was so angry at him about the car that I didn't call him, and 2 days later he was dead. And I feel really bad I never called him.
How old was he then?
50. You gotta tell your parents that you love them.
My father first got sick about 4 years ago. And I realized that he was 80 when he died, that in my 51 years, I had never sat down with the man and just talked man to man about things. And so it troubled me so much that I went and sought some help. And I went to a guy. I walked into his office, and he was a psychiatrist. And I said, I think probably the most dangerous people that walk into a psychiatrist's office are ones that start by saying, there's absolutely nothing wrong with me. I think that man is probably totally insane. But that was what I said. I don't think there's anything wrong with me, but there's a problem, and it's my inability to be able to communicate with my father, and he's desperately ill, and I want to be able to tell the man that I love him. But I want to be able to talk to him about substance and things that matter and feelings that I've had for him and things that he's done that bother me. And I'm afraid if he dies and I never get to say it, I'll regret it the rest of my life. So I worked on this for 6 months. And my dad and I went on a fishing trip, and we were out on a boat in the Gulf of Mexico. And I confronted him with this. And we spent 2 weeks, and all we did was talk and fish. And I think it was probably the most beautiful 2 weeks in my life out of the 51 years that I had known him.
Hot Hero Sandwich. We'll be back after these messages.